Seychelles offshore banking is a touchy subject, and for good reason. This tiny nation has had a long and colorful history as an offshore hub since the Cold War. But today, the country is better known for tourism, tuna, and the notorious Seychelles IBC. In this video, we'll explore Seychelles offshore banking, pulling back the curtain on the advantages and disadvantages, who could consider banking here, and what you might want to do instead. But before we jump in, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you get alerted every time we post new non-resident banking opportunities. Here at GlobalBanks, we help individuals and businesses unlock the benefits of international banking by helping them find and open accounts with the best banks around the world. To help you get started, we have a free non-resident banking starter guide designed to help non-resident and foreigners open bank accounts. So don't forget to download your copy using the link in the description below. Here's the short version of what you should know before considering opening a Seychelles offshore bank account. In 1976, Seychelles gained independence from Britain. The first ever president takes office. Then, a few months later, everything goes to hell. The new government was overthrown in a coup, masterminded by a socialist who inserted himself as prime minister. Several years later, the unthinkable happens. The Seychelles became the first socialist tax haven in the world. From that point on, the country's history reads like something out of a spy thriller. Guns for hire, diplomatic passports, money laundering, mafia, crooks, corrupt officials, and economic investment programs for criminals. They were even exporting heroin in tuna cans. Odds are, if it was bad, it happened there. But like most countries, the Seychelles has cleaned up its act. For the most part. Today, Seychelles offshore banking is small, undeveloped, and where you go to bank if you literally can't open accounts anywhere else. In other words, it's a last resort banking hub. There's no deposit insurance, fees are high, sophistication is low, and customer service isn't great. And the country, generally speaking, has a poor reputation internationally. So, if you're banking here or have a Seychelles IBC, it can impact your reputation and raise your perceived risk level. But that doesn't stop people from using Seychelles IBCs for various purposes. And for many, it used to be a reasonable option. You see, for years, offshore companies and Seychelles IBCs were able to open accounts at Barclays, which had a branch in the Seychelles. Finding a brand name bank in the middle of the Indian Ocean with a low deposit requirement of only $5,000 US was a dream for many. So naturally, many low-value clients with offshore companies opened accounts. Then, Barclays increased the minimum deposit to $100,000, and that move forced many Seychelles IBCs to look elsewhere. Worse, Barclays pulled out of the Seychelles completely in 2015, leaving owners of IBCs with no real domestic options. In fact, today there are basically two offshore banking options in the Seychelles. But if you can get into one of these banks, you can probably open an account in a better jurisdiction. So, who should consider Seychelles offshore banking? Well, the Seychelles offshore banking industry is small. In fact, it's not really an industry at all. Bank offerings aren't very sophisticated, service is generally poor, and banking in the Seychelles can raise red flags about your business's reputation when dealing with the outside world. So, who would actually consider Seychelles offshore banking? Well, there are a few obvious groups that come to mind, including owners of Seychelles IBCs, owners of offshore companies that can't open bank accounts anywhere else, anyone desperate for remote opening that can't open elsewhere, and local businesses operating in the Seychelles. But even when it does make sense to open a Seychelles bank account, there are still challenges. You see, when it comes to offshore banking in the Seychelles, there are a few things that you need to be aware of before opening an account here. First, the country has unstable correspondent banking relationships, or CBRs. In fact, most banks only have one correspondent banking relationship for each major currency, such as the US dollar. This is a huge threat to the country's financial sector, and it could be incredibly problematic if you bank here. Second, limited banking options. Since there are only a few banks in the Seychelles to choose from, you'll be hard-pressed to find a bank that meets your needs. In fact, in terms of overall reputation, safety, customer service, and fees, you'll find more reliable and stable banking options outside of the Seychelles. Third, high banking and account maintenance fees. Similar to banks in the Caribbean or any small country, banking fees are higher than usual in the Seychelles. Before attempting to open an account here or anywhere, make sure you take a good, hard look at the fees so you understand the cost of running the account on a day-to-day basis. Fourth, bank account freezes. As the Seychelles adapts to new, stricter banking regulations and rules for transparency and information sharing, its banking sector will change, and there will be hiccups along the way. For instance, after the country's Financial Intelligence Unit was formed in 2013, they imposed new protocols to automatically freeze client accounts for 5 days anytime an STR or suspicious transaction report was filed. And just so you know, STRs can be issued for pretty much anything. And if banks around the world all froze accounts every time an STR was issued, the banking world would grind to a complete halt. This is just one issue of many that could impact your accounts when you bank in jurisdictions struggling to keep up with changing regulations. Lastly, payment processing problems. If you're opening a bank account in the Seychelles, you'll have limited payment processing options available to you. Remember, most payment processors require you to have a bank account in the same country where your company is registered in order to receive payouts. And it's difficult to find a payment processor who will even consider paying a bank in a third country. So, keep your payment processing goals in mind when choosing banks. So, with all these problems, why do people want to bank in the Seychelles today? Well, there are a few reasons, but unfortunately, most of them are inaccurate or misinformed. You see, most people first come across the Seychelles when they're looking to set up an offshore entity. There are endless legitimate reasons why someone might want an offshore entity, and there are many reasons why the Seychelles may at face value appear to be a sound jurisdiction to consider. For example, someone might be considering Belize, Panama, British Virgin Islands, Marshall Islands, and the Seychelles. But upon further research, they find out that most of these options are expensive, have hefty annual fees, and many have annual reporting requirements. The Seychelles, however, do not. So, you buy a Seychelles IBC because either it's the cheapest option or the corporate service provider you're working with says they offer Seychelles company formation with a bank account. Unfortunately, once your Seychelles IBC is ready, your service provider informs you that your only banking options are an EMI or an unstable bank with a horrible reputation. Worse, they might suggest opening with a bank that would never open an account for a Seychelles IBC in the first place, just to collect more fees from you. This is the unfortunate trap that many people find themselves falling into, owning a company that they can't open bank accounts for. So, what's the best case scenario? After spending hundreds of hours, you might find a bank that will accept an account opening application from a Seychelles IBC. But even then, it's not guaranteed, and you probably have to pay fees just to have them consider you. On top of that, if you end up opening an account, the bank is probably not going to meet your standards. The fees will be extortionate, and customer service is going to be a foreign concept, literally. So what should you do instead? Before setting up a Seychelles company, it's important to understand your objectives, your banking requirements, and how you want your business and you to be perceived. This sort of planning is what will allow you to find and open at the best banks possible. Of course, if you need to open bank accounts to support your existing business, this doesn't help. In which case, you'll be happy to learn that there are decent banks out there willing to accept Seychelles IBCs, so long as you and the business are legitimate. So, if you need help sorting out your Seychelles offshore banking options, want to know which banks you should apply to, or just aren't sure where to turn, we can help. All you have to do is join our flagship service, GlobalBanks Insider. With GlobalBanks Insider, you'll get instant access to our entire archive of banking intelligence reports. including our most recent report on opening international bank accounts for offshore companies. This report helps owners of offshore companies from countries like the Seychelles navigate the international banking world and open accounts effectively. Plus, you'll get immediate access to our GlobalBanks database, home to more than 250 banks from 50 plus countries, including detailed bank profiles, client preferences, and a whole lot more. Finally, you'll also get real-time analyst support from our team of experts, ready to answer your most pressing banking questions and to make suggestions on which banks will meet your objectives. To get started, just click the link in the description below to learn more about GlobalBanks Insider. And before signing off, don't forget to hit subscribe so you get alerted every time we share new banking opportunities. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.